A racist Karen calls the cops on me, a black father, for having a son who's white. She accuses me of being a child predator and tries to get me arrested. Joke's on her, she gets arrested. Here's what happened. So I'm a 32-year-old black father living in a small town with my wife and son. My wife is Estonian and my son is the result of our interracial marriage. My son has blue eyes and he got them from my mother. Growing up, I've always been used to people being a bit confused when they see him, but I never thought it would be a problem. I love my son more than anything in the world and he's the best thing that's ever happened to me. It was a beautiful day and I decided to take my son to the park. He loves playing with other kids and I love watching him have fun. I sat on a park bench supervising him as he played with the other kids, laughing and having a great time. So, it was time to leave the park. I shouted at my son and came running as we were leaving the park towards a bus stop nearby. A woman approached us and began to question me. She said, "Excuse me, sir, is that your child?" And I replied, "Yeah, he's my son." I thought she was just asking a genuine question, but she didn't believe me, and then full-on accused me of kidnapping the child. I can understand why she may think that, so I explained to her, "Ma'am, I get why you may think that, but he's my son. My wife is white." But she wasn't satisfied with that and said, "I don't believe you. There's no way that a black man can have a white son." I was getting angry at this point, and I said, "Look, lady, I don't have to prove anything to you. He's my son. End of story." But she still insisted, and even went as far as to ask my son, "Is this man your father?" And my son, who was visibly shaken and confused by this woman's behavior, said, "What do you mean? He's my dad." But for some reason, she still insisted that I was lying and that I couldn't possibly be the father of a white child. Feeling offended, I told Karen to F off, and I tried to leave the park and walk towards the bus stop a few hundred meters away. But Karen followed us and continued to accuse me of being a kidnapper. She was getting louder and more aggressive, and I could see people in around us start to stare at us. I didn't know what to do, to be honest, so I tried to ignore her and just walk away, but she wouldn't let up. She even went as far as to tell me that I don't deserve to be near kids. I was so angry and frustrated at this point that I decided to tell her off and said, "You're a racist piece of shit. My son and I don't have to put up with your bullshit. Leave us the fuck alone." My son started crying at this point, and he was super confused by the commotion and didn't like seeing his daddy screaming. I didn't want to make a scene in front of my son, so I tried to calm down, but Karen wouldn't stop. She even went as far as to call me a pedo N-word with a hard R. And that's when I lost it. I screamed at her. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I probably shouldn't have said such words in front of my son, who was crying harder then, and I could see the fear and confusion in his eyes. I felt terrible, but I couldn't control my anger. Karen then decided to call the police, and I knew that things were about to get worse. I told her not to do it, and she'd regret it, but she didn't listen. So, at this point in time, I was hoping the bus would arrive and I'd just evade Karen and the police, but that didn't happen. The police arrived within minutes, and they spoke to both of us. I explained to one of the officers on what had happened, and the cop then asked my son if I was his father, and he confirmed that I was indeed his father. The cops looked at Karen and could tell she was obviously lying and that this was definitely a racially motivated attack. They apologized to me and asked if I wanted to press charges. I was too shaken and angry to think clearly, so I told them to do whatever they had to do. They ended up cuffing her and arresting her for making a false police report. The whole incident left me feeling drained, and I had a hard time explaining to my son what had just happened. I tried to explain it to him in a way that he could understand, but I don't think he fully understood. I knew that the incident would leave a lasting impact on him, and it broke my heart. I didn't want him to grow up with that hate and fear in his heart, because I myself still have trauma from my childhood. I got home and told my wife what had happened, and she was so furious. Yeah, so that's the story of how I was falsely accused of being a child predator because I'm black and my son's white. I am just in shock reading this story from OP. The level of racism and ignorance displayed by this woman referred to as Karen is truly unbelievable. To accuse a black father of being a child predator simply because his son is white is not only racist, but it is also completely unfounded and ridiculous. I can only imagine the fear and confusion must have been running through OP's son's mind as this woman accused his father of being a kidnapper. What's more, the way Karen continued to harass and belittle OP and his son, even after he'd explained the truth, is truly disturbing. The fact that she then decided to call the police on OP just adds to the craziness of the situation. It's a relief to know that the police saw through Karen's lies and arrested her. OP handled the situation with such grace and strength, standing up for himself and his son in the face of such racist and unfounded accusations. It's clear that he loves his son more than anything and would do anything to protect him. This story is a stark reminder that we still have a long way to go as a species. Entitled father explodes when I won't hand his teenager a firearm. So this happened this past weekend, and I'm still kind of shaking my head at this one. I'm an amateur competitive shooter. I compete in several disciplines, but by far, my favorite is cowboy action shooting. It's timed, high speed, and a lot of fun. Everyone dresses up as cowboys/girls, uses period weapons, and you pick your own cowboy name. That's right, we're nerds with guns. The best part about the community is that almost everyone tries to give back in some way. The way I choose is to dress up and donate my time telling folk tales at the local library. Mine is the Firearms, of course. Several of the other club members will attend heritage days, fairs, and the like. Last week, I get a call from our club president. He tells me that some of the members would be performing at a heritage festival a couple of counties over from me, and he asked me if I'd pitch in and help. I tell him that I'd love to and ask for the details. He gives me all the information and asks me to do him a favor. He wants me to bring the big gun. I laugh and tell him I'd be happy to. The big gun is my all-time favorite firearm. In 1874, Sharp's Quigley, so named because it was used in the Tom Selleck movie Quigley Down Under. I won't go into technical specs, but she's a pig, roughly 4 foot long and weighing somewhere around 13 pounds. She's even made by the same company that made the rifles for the movie. She's too big, too heavy, too expensive, and I love her. Her name is Cora. If you saw the movie, you'll get it. So I show up on Saturday, drag all my stuff to the booth, and basically stand around looking like knockoff Tom Selleck. Now, there are some strict precautions taken when we do events like this. No live ammunition anywhere on site. We even dig through our vehicles beforehand to make sure we didn't leave any in there by mistake. All weapons are transported in securely locked, hard-sided cases, and whenever they are removed, they have trigger locks on them. The club members that are performing will have blank rounds for fake gunfights, but those are kept in separate locked containers. While I'm standing around the booth, I answer any questions people may have. Yes, it's from that movie. Yes, it will shoot that far. No, I don't think I could do it. As this is going on, I see a boy, maybe 15 to 16 years old, studying my rifle pretty intently. I ask him if he has any questions, and he proceeds to rattle off all the specs of the rifle to me. I'm impressed, and tell him that he really knows his stuff. He tells me that Quigley was his grandfather's favorite movie, and that he used to watch it with him before he died. We talk about the movie, and how awesome Alan Rickman was before he asks if he can hold a rifle. I tell him that I don't have a problem with it if he gets his parents to come over and give their permission. The kid runs off, and after a bit he returns with his father. I knew I was in for a rough time when the first words out of his mouth were, "Why don't you let my son touch the fucking gun?" I could tell that this was typical behavior, by the way, because the kid turned bright red and stared at the ground. All the other club members had gone off for a performance, so I was alone at the booth with the kid and this idiot. I told the man, "Sir, I have no problem with him touching the rifle, I just want your permission first. He's a minor, and I didn't think it was a good idea to hand a firearm to him without your consent." The guy starts to yell at me, saying, "I don't see what the big effing deal is. It's not effing loaded." I respond with, "I take it he has your permission?" "Of course he fucking does." I tell the boy to go ahead. His face lights up as he hefts the rifle, grinning from ear to ear. He asks if I can take his picture, and I agree. I even took my cartridge belt off and let him wear it. Just dummy rounds. Only bullet and casing, no primer or powder. The kid thanks me and starts to walk off before his father stops him. "Do you want to play with any of these other guns?" I inform the father that I don't own those weapons, but he's welcome to wait and ask the people who do. He starts yelling about how he doesn't need permission and how this is a free country and that he can do what he wants. All this yelling gets the attention of the deputies that are patrolling the fairgrounds. A couple of them walk over and tell him that if he doesn't calm down, then he'll be asked to leave. He quickly tells his son that they're leaving, but before they walk away, I call out to him. I pull one of the dummy rounds out of my belt and ask, "Can he have this?" He mumbled something about not caring, so I hand it to his son. I tell the boy what it is and that he can make a keychain or something out of it. I also hand him a club card with my email written on the back. I said, "If you can get permission from another guardian who's willing to bring you out and sign some paperwork, let me know, and you can come shoot a match with us. I'll even bring Cora." I received an email from his mother this evening, and they'll both be joining us for a match in a couple weeks. I'm reading the story, and I'm just in shock at the behavior of this Karen. Like, seriously? Asking to hand a teenager a firearm without consent, and then flipping out when they say no? That's just crazy. And the fact that the OP was so willing to accommodate the kid and his interest in firearms, but still had safety precautions in place is just admirable. It's stories like this that make me so grateful for the responsible gun community out there. Trigger warning. This next story is going to be discussing some sensitive topics. I sent my friend's creepy dad to jail after I found out he was a child predator. Here's what happened. So anyway, before we get into the story, my friend's dad was then divorced. Turns out he was a child predator with loads of CP on his laptop and is in jail. and had about 5 restraining orders after the friends and the friends' parents he stole bras and panties from. Okay, how I found this out was at my friend's birthday sleepover. We were swimming in her pool and we drank some wine coolers with her mom's supervision, still illegal, but we didn't get drunk, just slightly tipsy. So anyway, friend's dad had a strict no locked doors policy. Anyway, I decided to take a shower, so I, of course, locked the door. I was bathing in my friend's bathroom, so I had her bedroom door shut and the bathroom door locked, if that makes sense. So I heard my friend's bedroom door open as I shouted, "Occupied," out of the shower. I got no response except the door shutting quickly, which I thought was just one of the other girls walking in and seeing that I was in there. Anyway, I stepped out of the shower and I stayed in the bathroom while I changed and dried off. All of a sudden, the bedroom door opens again, and when I said occupied, the person didn't stop and went straight for the bathroom door as they jiggled the handle extremely violently and pounded on the door once. I stayed silent as I thought there was someone in the house trying to get me. 10 seconds later, I hear her dad's voice yell, "Open this damn door right frickin' now!" I'm already changed into clean clothes as I stayed silent and slowly opened the door. "Why the hell is the door locked?" he shouted as I apologized and explained I was showering and wanted privacy. As he said, that's no excuse. I pushed that aside as I thought he was in a bad mood or something happened, and he couldn't do anything because the door was locked. I stuffed my dirty clothes into my bag as I went back to the party, which we were all settling down with sleeping bags since the living room was big enough for us. I set my bag right next to me as I have some valuable stuff in the bag. Phone, charger, money, etc. We watched movies up until 4 in the morning, which is when we started to go to sleep. I got a strange feeling about being watched, so I stayed up for another hour on my phone. I fell asleep as about an hour later I hear rustling next to my head. I opened my eyes to see the friend's dad squatting next to me, rumbling through my bag as he pulled out my dirty bra and underwear as he stood up. I screamed at the top of my lungs as everyone woke up. My stuff was everywhere as the dad's friend quickly dropped my stuff. I screamed, "What the frick are you doing?" at him as everyone saw what he did and dropped my stuff. I screamed, "What the frick are you doing?" at him as everyone saw what he did and saw him drop my stuff. He tried to defend himself as his wife came rushing in. "I was making sure you didn't have any drugs," was the excuse he went with. I ran over to the wife and explained what happened as the dad was saying that I'm a lying skank and that I forced him to hold my stuff. He was high on crack or one or the other. As the husband was moved to a different room, and I explained to the friend what her dad did, and she told me someone else, and I guess it spread around. Everyone was panicking as they were all making sure the man didn't take their panties and bras. Then I hear the husband scream, "She stole your underwear!" And so I called the police. Then 10 seconds later, I hear the wife scream as it was just a shit show. We all ran over to her to make sure she was all right, as everything started to go to chaos. Girls were crying and panicking because he had an area which his wife didn't know about. And there were name tags for each underwear pile, like Cindy's underwear, fake name. And there was white stains on some of them. The police arrived and we explained to them what happened as he was taken away. But a few months later, I went to court as my parents were pressing charges. I explained what happened and we won the case. Then about another few months go by and I was talking to my same friend, and she said her parents got a divorce and their dad was in jail for CP and harassment. So I talked to the friend, and it turns out that her dad bought the wine coolers trying to get us drunk. And her mother saved us from who knows what because she cut us off of the wine coolers after like 2 drinks. Who knows what would have happened if we were all passed out drunk. Later, I was again talking to the friend, and this is basically what happened after court, and he was sent to jail. He's still in jail, and he was put into protective custody in the prison at the beginning because, and I quote, "he fricked with the little kids so the prisoners are going to F him even harder," but later was removed for trying to smuggle contraband. The other part is that his daughter, 16 now, went to visit him with her mother just to disown him as her father. And when he arrived at that little phone booth thing, she said that half his hair was pulled out. He was bruised. His uniform was dirty, with who knows what, and he could barely walk. It was the beatings he got, or the stuck up the bum. The rest of the girls there, I don't really know, but I talked to a few of them about a month ago, and 12 to 13 is doing fine. The 13th one isn't bad, but isn't good. She has night terrors from it, and has a service dog to help. What the heck did I just read? What a sicko. I'm glad he's in jail. From what I've heard, people like him do very poorly in jail. The underwear thing is disgusting enough on its own. But the no locked doors thing? Even families that have that rule usually exclude bathrooms, especially with strangers. He was 100% hoping to accidentally walk in on you naked. And I'm honestly sick thinking about how many times he may have accidentally walked in on his daughter. Or even just peeked in without her knowing.
A racist Karen told me to leave a Starbucks because I didn't belong there. Just because I'm black. She said that this was a white Starbucks, whatever that means. Here's how it all happened. I'm a 21-year-old black male living in a pretty rich town, and I was just trying to grab a quick coffee from Starbucks before heading to work when I was confronted with one of the most entitled, racist Karens I've ever encountered. I walked into the Starbucks and got in line to order my coffee. That's when I saw her, a middle-aged white woman with a scowl on her face, sitting at a table right in front of the door. As I walked past her to find an open table, she called out to me. "Excuse me, are you okay?" she asked, sounding genuinely concerned. I turned to her and gave her a confused look. Yeah, I'm fine. Why do you ask?" She hesitated for a moment before saying, "It's just that it's not common for you guys to come in here." My blood began to boil. Did she really just say, "you guys"? And what the hell did she mean by common? Was she implying that black people don't belong in the Starbucks? I tried to stay calm and keep my voice level as I replied. "I'm sorry, what do you mean by you guys?" She stuttered for a moment before trying to change the subject. "Oh, I didn't mean anything by it. I just meant that it's not common to see people like you around here. You know, with all your friends and your people." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Even when she was trying to backtrack, she was still being racist. I could feel the anger and frustration welling up inside me. I decided to ignore her and focus on ordering my coffee, but she just couldn't let it go. She kept asking me if I was okay, if I needed anything, if I was sure I didn't want to sit at a different table. It was clear that she was trying to get rid of me, and her thinly veiled racism was starting to make me feel physically ill. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up and confronted her, telling her that her comments and behavior were unacceptable and that I had every right to be in this coffee shop just like everyone else. She sneered at me and stood up, getting right in my face. "You think you can just waltz in here and take over? This is a place for our kind of people, not yours." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'd never experienced such blatant racism in my life, and I wasn't going to stand for it. I told her that she needed to leave and that her views were not welcome in this day and age. She huffed and puffed, but instead of storming out of the shop, she marched over to the counter and began complaining to the minimum wage worker behind the register. "This man is causing a disturbance and making me feel uncomfortable. I demand that he be asked to leave immediately." The worker, who looked like they were already dealing with more than they could handle, cast a sympathetic look in my direction before turning to Karen saying, "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but there's nothing I can do. If you feel uncomfortable, you're welcome to leave, but this customer has done nothing wrong." The Karen persisted. She started to raise her voice and demand that I be thrown out, but the worker wouldn't budge. Finally, she threw her arms up in defeat and marched out of the shop, leaving me standing there in shock. I felt more bad for the worker than I did myself. I'm used to people like that Karen, but it's no doubt a difficult situation for someone who is just trying to do their job. Especially as the worker was just a teenager, it must have been a terrifying experience. I was so relieved that the worker had stood up for me and hadn't given in to the Karen's demands. Supposedly, we're living in a more progressive world, but racism and entitlement are still alive and well. It's disheartening to say the least. I'm so glad you were able to get the support of a worker who was willing to stand up for you, despite being scared themselves. I'm sorry this woman had no respect for your space and your time. I hope that this experience hasn't shaken your confidence too much. My entitled teacher thought she would never get caught abusing her students. We put up with her abuse for years until we finally managed to get her caught. Buckle up, because revenge here has never been sweeter. Here's how it all happened. Mrs. Spike was the PE/health teacher for me grades 8 through 12, and my brothers for most of those years. She ended her reign of terror 2 years ago. A story here reminded me of her, so I figured I would tell Reddit about her. Mrs. Spike chose her favorite students at the beginning of their 8th grade year. I was not one of those golden children, and neither were any of my siblings. If you were a favorite, you got an A+ no matter what. If she didn't care for you, you had to do all the volunteer activities and extra credit assignments to get above a C-. Her least favorites, me and one of my brothers included, were picked on relentlessly. She would lose our assignments and doctor's notes, and she loved it. Mrs. Spike did not teach properly either. Everything she taught was outdated, and when someone who wasn't her boss tried to correct her, she would send them to the office and or ignore them. My first story is from when I was a sophomore in high school. I'd hit my head during basketball practice and gotten a concussion. I had to know from not only the doctor, the school nurse, my basketball coach, and my parents, but my grandma too. I think it was so that she couldn't say she didn't know. It didn't work. I was not allowed to participate in PE that day because of my concussion, and having not been able to keep anything down. Mrs. Spike looked at all the notes and decided not to believe me or any of the adults. She told me that I would fail her class if I didn't participate in class that day. It was kickball, and not even 10 minutes into the class, I started getting dizzy. Everything was blurry, even with my glasses on, and everything sounded like I was hearing through a pair of seashells. "Mrs. Spike, I need to sit down," I said. "You can sit down when the game is over," she said. "I don't think I can," I said. "Next kicker," Mrs. Spike shouted over me. The game went on for a few more minutes, and I was barely existing. I was leaning against the wall closest to the base I was supposed to be guarding. I was sweaty, shaky, dizzy, and nauseous. The world started to fall away. Some of my classmates were shouting at Mrs. Spike. Didn't learn until later that they were yelling at her to tell her that I needed to go to the nurse. One of the guys called her an idiot. He was no longer one of her favorites after that day. One of the girls in class poked me and helped me walk to the locker room. I promptly vomited into my gym locker. After that, I dragged myself to the office and asked to call my grandma. Grandma is now Mary. I laid in the nurse's office for about 5 to 10 minutes while my grandma Mary came to my rescue. As we were getting into the car, Mrs. Spike came up to us with my purse. "I'm sorry, Mary and OP. I really thought you would be okay," Mrs. Spike said. "I thought OP had forged those notes." "Mrs. Spike, my granddaughter can barely write in her own hand, let alone nurse, mom, dad, doc, and me. You're lucky that I'm not on the school board. I would have your ass kicked out of here and on the streets," Grandma said. She took my purse from Mrs. Spike, climbed up into her Suburban, and slammed the door. I climbed in after her and we went home. I did not go back to school until the next Tuesday. The next Mrs. Spike story is from almost exactly a year later. I was stuck in her PE class once again because the world is cruel. We were all hanging out in gym, sitting on the bleachers, waiting for class to start. When it was time to start, my klutzy self rolled my left ankle when I was getting down. I told Mrs. Spike what I had done and that my ankle hurt way more than it should. "You're just trying to get out of running," Mrs. Spike said. Then she turned to the whole class. 1 mile run. Whoever finishes first gets out of class 5 minutes early." I was a good student and still hate causing trouble, so I ran. She was timing 5 people, including me. As I forced myself to run, it felt like someone was using a heavy hammer on my ankle. I was trying not to cry the whole time. Doing my best wasn't good enough for Mrs. Spike. "OP, you didn't do a fast enough mile to pass the class. I want you to run it again," Mrs. Spike said. "Mrs. Spike, my ankle really hurts. I think I need to see the nurse," I said. "Stop complaining and do what I said," Mrs. Spike snapped. Another mile doubled the pain. Who would have thought, right? The second mile was worse because I fell several times, making my ankle hurt more. You'll never guess what she wanted me to do next. She wanted me to run another fucking mile. I lengthened the mile and she finally accepted it because class was over by the time I came back. I'm pretty sure my ankle was broken that day, just not badly enough to turn at a strange angle. To this day, my ankle still hurts when I'm on my feet too long and when it's cold. 1 week later, we were lifting weights for some reason. Strange because we had been running in circles and jumping over stuff for the last 3 weeks, and weightlifting was not on the syllabus. Well, I didn't and still don't lift weights often and do not enjoy it. I was talking with another student when Mrs. Spike decided that my somewhat limply raised hand, also my left funnily enough, looked prepared to hold a dumbbell. I cried out in pain at the sudden weight in my hand and pain in my wrist as it dragged me toward the ground. "You're not supposed to drop it like that," Mrs. Spike said. She sighed exasperatedly and picked up the dumbbell that she had dropped on me. "Now do it right." I had enough. Between my wrist and ankle hurting, and her having given me a failing grade on an essay I had corrected, I marched myself to the office. I was given a passing grade for the day and the essay after the nurse looked at my wrist. It too gives me problems even now. The fourth adventure in Mrs. Spike's horrible class is actually my brother's. For the story, he is Jake. Jake is 5 years younger than me. It was his 8th grade health class where this went down. TW, stabbing, and blood. Jake had been bullied through all of elementary school and into middle school by a boy in his class. Duke for the story. Mrs. Spike seemed to love putting Jake and Duke together in class to watch someone else pick on my brother. Jake is a skinny boy with glasses that looks like Velma from Scooby-Doo. He doesn't defend himself. That is what his twin and our other sibs are for. Jake's twin was on the other side of the classroom and Jake was sitting beside Duke. Duke had gotten bored of just verbal bullying. So, he decided to sharpen an old number 2 gold pencil really well and stab my brother in the arm, just above the elbow. My brother screamed bloody murder. "Jake, you need to be quiet while I'm teaching." Mrs. Spike didn't even turn around. "Mrs. Spike, Duke stabbed me in the arm," Jake said. "Liars go to the principal's office, Jake," Mrs. Spike droned on. "I want to go to the nurse," Jake said. "After class," Mrs. Spike said. "But I'm bleeding all over the desk," Jake said. "You are not leaving this classroom until I say so." Mrs. Spike finally turned around to snap at Jake. "I want to call Grandma Mary." Jake started digging in his bag for his phone. "You will not call her or anyone else in my classroom." Mrs. Spike moved to stand guard by the door. Duke was laughing his fool's head off the whole time. Jake's twin, who loves all things weightlifting, wrestling, football, and bodybuilding, stomped over and slammed a fist into Duke's desk. Duke shut up and straightened up. The twins and Mrs. Spike argued for the rest of the class. As soon as the bell rang, the twins barreled through Mrs. Spike and into the office. They called our grandma and dad. This was the incident that ended her career. My family took the stabbing to the school board. They gathered other students that Mrs. Spike had picked on and failed, their parents, and Duke plus his family. My family demanded that Mrs. Spike be fired and have Duke expelled. Duke somehow squirmed free of expulsion and was just suspended from school for 2 weeks. Duke's family's rich, so of course he got off with that. Mrs. Spike was not exactly fired, but she was not allowed within 60 feet of either of the twins. The twins had permission from Dad to hit her if she tried anything. She decided not to continue with her contract of her own accord 2 years ago, at the beginning of the school year. You are lucky to have such a great family. I'm glad that you have been able to recover from your ordeal and that things seem to be looking up for you. I hope that this is the last time anything like this happens to you. You should feel very blessed because not everyone has people like your parents and brother in their lives. A wild Karen and Karen Jr. encounter. So this just happened and I'm still shaking my head. For some context, I'm autistic and really don't handle confrontation well. However, I'm currently training my border collie, Storm, to be a psychiatric assistance animal. We are so very close to him being fully certified, but for the moment, our trainer and I organize passes for us to both go to buildings, planes, trains, etc., so we can expose him to different environments, sounds, smells, etc. Today we were getting on a train to the city, 1 hour and 15-minute ride. We got on at the front next to the guard, showed him the approval letter stating Storm is in training and all was good. We boarded and Storm laid under my legs, taking up minimal room as per his training. We get to the first stop and in comes Karen, K, and her younger daughter, Karen Jr., KJ. They both sit on the other side of the aisle, next to me. After a few minutes, KJ notices Storm laying under my legs and says to K, "Mom, that man has a dog, can I pet it?" And she replies something along the lines of, "Just ask." But I can't be 100% certain as I wasn't actively paying attention. Next thing I know, I hear, "Excuse me," from KJ, and the following conversation ensues. KJ, "Can I pet your dog?" Me, "No, sorry, he's currently training and can't be pet." KJ, "What do you mean he's training?" Me, "He's training to be an assistance animal and it's very important that no one interferes with him." K, "Come back, sweetie. Unfortunately, some people don't know how to share." I tried to remain calm, but Storm instantly knew my anxiety was flaring up. So he got up and confronted me as he is trained to do. I rewarded him with a treat, a good boy, and finally, the lay command, at which point the Karen approached us. K, "You should be teaching him to interact with children. My daughter just wanted to give him a pet, and you rewarding him for ignoring her is just plain rude." Me, "Excuse me? He's working and currently in training. I rewarded him for responding to me appropriately, not for ignoring your kid. Leave us alone, please." K, "You're lying. He's not a Labrador. They're the only dogs that are smart enough to become assistance animals. He looks like a border collie. They're just farm dogs, so quit lying." At this, my anxiety was starting to peak, and Storm got up and sat on my lap to comfort and calm me down. I reached for my treats pouch and began to get a treat out when Karen reached in and took a treat before me, handing it to Storm. K, "Good boy." Me, "Get away from me." I screamed and began crying. The train came to an unscheduled stop at the next station and a group of police officers got on. K and KJ were moved to the next carriage and we continued on, with an officer staying with me until the next station. Fast forward to the end of the line and we get into the city as I was talking to the guard who had actually organized for the police to join us. K and KJ saw us. KJ ran up to us and just as I saw her hand reach out and down, I gave Storm the command, "Other side." He swiftly moved behind and to the left side, away from her. Me, "I told you no." KJ, "My mom said I could, so let me." With that, she tried to pull his leash out of my hand. I dropped the leash and gave Storm the command, "Danger," to which he ran and sat under a seat in the middle of the platform. Karen then enters, pushing me on the shoulder, and by this stage, my fight or flight response was the only thing in control, and I pushed her back, knocking her to the ground. More police were on the platform in what felt like seconds. I called for Storm as they arrived, handed them his paperwork, and told them everything that had happened. I'm now writing this from inside a police station while waiting to do a victim impact statement. The Karen got arrested for assault and interfering with a service animal. I've never heard of anything like that before. I'm so sorry that you had to go through that original poster. That sounds absolutely awful. Karen is a jerk and a terrible person for doing that to you and your dog. I hope she gets what's coming to her.
I never thought I'd have to fight for my service dog, but that's exactly what happened when I met Karen in the park. She was determined to take Max away from me, and I knew that I had to stand up to her. It was a tense, terrifying experience, but I emerged victorious. Here's how it all went down. I was out in public with my service dog, Max, a German Shepherd who helps me manage my PTSD. It was a beautiful day, and I was chatting with a friend when a woman, Karen, interrupted us. Karen demanded that I give her my service dog because she thought he was cute and would be better off with her. I tried to explain that Max was a trained service dog and that I needed him to manage my PTSD, but Karen wouldn't listen. She kept insisting that I give her the dog and said that I wasn't fit to take care of him. I started to get angry and told her to leave me alone, but Karen just mocked me and said that she didn't believe that I had PTSD. At that point, I was really frustrated. I've had to deal with people like Karen before, who don't understand the importance of service dogs for people with disabilities. I tried to explain to her how much Max had helped me, but she just accused me of faking my PTSD and said that I was just using it as an excuse to have a dog. I was so angry that I wanted to scream, but I knew that wouldn't help anything. I just wanted Karen to leave me alone and let me go about my day with Max. Karen continued to demand that I give her my service dog, Max. She kept saying that she had a right to him and that he would be better off with her. I could feel my anger rising, but I tried to stay calm and explain to her why I needed Max. I told her that he was trained to help me manage my PTSD and that I couldn't function without him. But Karen just laughed and said that she didn't believe in service dogs. She said that they were just pets and that people like me were taking advantage of the system. At that point, I just wanted to get away from her. But Karen wasn't finished yet. She started to make comments about my military service, saying that I probably didn't even see combat. I told her that I had been deployed to Afghanistan, but she just rolled her eyes and said that I was probably lying. I was starting to lose my patience, and I could feel my blood boiling. Then, Karen did the unthinkable. She reached down and grabbed Max's leash, trying to pull him away from me. I could hear Max whining, and I knew that he was scared. I pulled back on the leash, trying to get him away from her, but Karen wouldn't let go. She kept saying that she was going to take him away from me, and I could see that she was getting more and more agitated. Finally, I had had enough. I yelled at her to let go of the leash, and I could feel my hands shaking with anger. Karen just sneered at me and said that I didn't deserve to have a dog. I knew that I had to get out of there before things got even worse, so I started to walk away. But Karen wasn't finished yet. She followed me, still holding onto the leash, and started to say even more hurtful things. Karen was getting even more aggressive, and I knew that I had to do something to stop her. I turned around and faced her, trying to keep my voice calm. "Karen, you need to let go of the leash," I said. "Max is my service dog, and I need him to manage my PTSD." But Karen just laughed at me. "You're not even a real veteran," she said. "You probably just made that up so that you could have a dog." I could feel my anger rising, and I clenched my fists. "That's not true," I said. "I served in Afghanistan, and I have the scars to prove it." Karen just sneered at me. "I don't believe you," she said, "and even if you did serve, that's no excuse for having a dog. You're just taking advantage of the system." That's when I saw red. I could feel the rage building inside me, and I knew that I had to do something to stop her. I took a step towards her, and she backed away, still holding onto the leash. "Karen, I'm warning you," I said. "Let go of the leash or I'll call the police." But Karen just laughed at me. "You're not going to do anything," she said. "You're just a coward who hides behind a dog." And that's when I snapped. I lunged towards her, trying to grab the leash out of her hand. She stumbled backwards, and for a moment I thought I had her. But then she regained her balance and she pushed me away. "Get away from me!" she screamed. "You're a freak, and so is your stupid dog!" I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes, and I knew that I had to get out of there. I turned and started to walk away, pulling Max along with me. But Karen wasn't finished yet. She followed me, still shouting insults and trying to grab the leash. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, and I knew that I had to do something to stop her. I turned around and faced her again, and this time I didn't hold back. "Karen, you need to leave me alone," I said. "I don't want to have anything to do with you." But Karen just laughed. "You're not going anywhere," she said. "I'm going to take that dog away from you, and there's nothing you can do about it." That's when I knew that I had to take action. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, dialing 911 as quickly as I could. "I'm being harassed by a woman in the park," I said. "She's trying to take my service dog away from me." Karen heard me talking to the dispatcher, and she started to back away. "You're not going to get away with this," she said. "I'll make sure that you're punished for what you did." But I didn't care. I knew that I had done the right thing, and that was all that mattered. As I hung up the phone, I looked down at Max and smiled. "We did it, buddy," I said. "We showed her that we're not going to back down." After the police arrived, they took statements from both Karen and me. Karen was still yelling and screaming, insisting that she had the right to take my service dog, but the police didn't take her side. They listened to my story and saw the marks on my arms where Karen had grabbed me. One of the officers, a kind-looking woman in her 30s, came over to me and asked if I was okay. I told her that I was fine, but that I was really shaken up. She nodded sympathetically and said that she understood. "These kinds of situations can be really difficult," she said, "but you did the right thing by calling us. We're here to help." I thanked her for her kind words, and she went back to talk to Karen. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could tell that Karen was getting more and more agitated. She was flailing her arms and shouting, and I could see that some of the other people in the park were starting to look over. Finally, the officer came back over to me and said that they were going to take Karen into custody. "We've had some problems with her in the past," she said. "She's been harassing people in the park for a while now, and we've been trying to catch her in the act. You just gave us the evidence we needed." I thanked the officer again, and she told me that they would be in touch if they needed any more information from me. Then she went over to Karen and started to handcuff her. Karen was still yelling and screaming, saying that she was going to sue me and the police department, but the officer just ignored her. As Karen was being led away, I looked down at Max and smiled. "We did it, buddy," I said. "We showed her that we're not going to let anyone take us down." Max wagged his tail happily, and I could feel the tension in my body starting to ease. After the police left, I took a deep breath and started to walk out of the park. I knew that I still had a long way to go in my recovery from PTSD, but I also knew that I had made a big step forward today. I had stood up for myself and my service dog, and I had shown Karen that she couldn't bully me into giving up what was mine. As I walked back to my apartment with Max by my side, I felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. I knew that I still had a lot of work to do, but I also knew that I had the strength and the courage to face whatever came my way. Can't believe some people still don't understand the importance of service dogs for people with disabilities. Glad the veteran stood up for himself and his dog though. Also, Max seems like such a good boy. I broke my son and his girlfriend up and he doesn't know it was me. I never thought my actions would lead to such devastating consequences. It all started when I found out my son was lying to his girlfriend, Kaylee. I didn't want to hurt anyone, but I couldn't let the lies continue. Here's how it all went down. I, female 49, broke my son and his girlfriend up. They had been dating for almost a year and seemed very happy. For backstory, my son, 19, moved out pretty soon after his biological father passed. He told me he wanted to expand on life because he was nervous he would waste it away being depressed over the death of someone so important to him. I understood completely and allowed him space and freedom, but we talked daily, and he visited all the time. After a while of living alone, he moved back. It was around this time that he introduced me to Kaylee, fake name. Me and Kaylee got along immediately. She lacked a mother in her life, and I think she was quick to establish that relationship with me. Off the bat, I noticed she was extremely paranoid and had extreme trust issues, but she wasn't toxic or manipulative, just anxious about where my son was going after work. She'd ask me, and I'd answer with, "He went to his friend Mike's house. They hang out to play PlayStation with each other." We both genuinely believed that my son was at Mike's house, and we had no reason to suspect he wasn't. One night, after my son came home to pick up his PS4 to hang out with Mike, Kaylee asked me to pick up some tampons and Tylenol for her. She lived close, and her periods were always super intense, so I was used to going out late into the night to help her. My son gets out of work at 4 o'clock, and is usually home or at Kaylee's place by 5:30, 6 o'clock at the latest. It was 6, and he hadn't swung by to drop off his PS4, so I shot him a text before I left the house to let him know why I was gone. It was something like, "Hey, Kaylee is on her period, so I'm heading out to grab supplies. You okay?" He answered me while I was driving, and I checked it when I got to the store. It was something like, "Yeah, I'm fine. Mike needed help building a shelf he bought, so I'm staying a little later." I sent back some message saying, "Okay, be safe," all of that mother stuff. But I was not ready to see Mike, working the cash register, smiling at me as soon as I walked in. I hadn't forgotten he worked here, but obviously figured it was his day off. I smiled back, but immediately I felt sick to my stomach. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he means he is building it for Mike while he works? I couldn't even think straight. I just got the tampons, some snacks, and Tylenol for Kaylee, and went to the register. Mike obviously started small talk with me. Paraphrasing because my memory is bad, but it went something like this. "Hi, Mrs. Last name." "Hello, Mike. How are you doing?" "I'm all right. Getting some supplies for my son's girlfriend." I remembered he laughed. "Speaking of your son, I haven't seen him in a few weeks. I need him to give me my PS4 controller he borrowed. Can you tell him that?" I felt sick again. I didn't want to put my son in the spotlight, so I didn't mention the stories my son had been feeding me. I just smiled and said, "I'll let him know." I paid for my stuff and left quickly. I drove to Kaylee's house and gave her the supplies, but I didn't know what to say or how to say it. She was smiling and laughing and looked carefree. She asked me where my son was. I couldn't lie to her. I couldn't. So I answered honestly, "I don't know. I didn't know where he was or who he was with. I just told her to call him and ask. She thanked me, and I left her house. Later that night, at around 8 p.m., my son finally came home. I didn't say much to him, just asked him if he had fun. He said yeah and went to his room. I knew I had to tell Kaylee. Soon after, I went into my room and called her. I informed her of what Mike had said and how late he had gotten home. She told me that he said he was home hours ago, just tired so he wasn't going to visit. I could tell she was crying, and I asked her if she wanted me to come over. I went to her house and we talked about everything, and she told me she didn't want anything to do with him and wanted to break up with him immediately. I told her she could, and if she wanted, she could be honest and say I told her. After I comforted her for a few hours, she asked if she could still contact me, even if she wasn't with my son. I said yes, but honestly I'm hesitant about it. I love her, but it feels off to me. I would still help her though. Fast forward a few days and my son comes crying to me that Kaylee broke up with him and isn't giving him any reason. I, of course, comfort him too. He said that she needed time to think about it and would tell him why when she knows what to say, but for now, she is supposedly speechless. He cried for hours in his room and in my arms, and regardless of what he did, of what I did, I comforted him. I want to tell him what I know, and I feel bad that he doesn't know. But Kaylee didn't tell him anything yet, so I might wait. Honestly, I feel stuck. This isn't just about cheating, even though I think he is. This is about trust and how he is lying to me and his girlfriend. We both know there is a possibility he isn't cheating, but he shouldn't have to lie if he has nothing to hide. I just wanted to say a few things. I'm fairly new to YTJ, but I've used it a few days mostly for hobbies over the years, and I'm sorry if my updates or the post itself was written poorly. I agree I should have spoken to my son about it first, but I was emotional, and I felt betrayed. I won't disclose anything, but my son is probably mentally ill, and I've tried to get him therapy his whole life, but we ran into so many issues such as money, and him not enjoying his therapist. I am going to discuss therapy now that I am financially stable, and I can support him in that. The next update will be the last. I appreciate everyone who commented and supported me, and the ones who criticized me. I am not the perfect mother, I never will be, and I know I have my flaws. Lastly, I am not okay with my son cheating. I may have worded it wrong, but that is because I am biting my tongue when it comes to expressing how mad, sad, and just grossed out I am. I truly don't think he realizes how much this hurts people, and I want him to be in therapy for that too. Since he was little, he has always hurt people's feelings, and never understood how it could have hurt them. A commenter asked OOP about Kaylee, to which she replied, I absolutely will stay in her life. I just hope that it won't cause any drama moving forward, and I hope my son has an explanation for his behavior. I will make an update sometime within the following days, but so far all I have found out is my son has sometimes ignored Kaylee for days on end with no explanation, and I haven't heard of it because she is a nervous person who avoids conflict. He also wants to invite a girl over for dinner tonight, which he never does ever, and I find it suspicious, but I'm hoping it is his friends. As for the lying, I have messaged Mike in hopes that he knows anything about my son. Another commenter stated that OOP did not break up her son, and Kaylee, her son's lying, did. The most important missing information, according to this commenter, was whether Mike got his controller back. OOP replied to a different commenter who criticized her for allowing her son space and freedom and accused her of being a terrible mother for choosing to love her son's girlfriend over her son. OOP explained that she initially limited her contact with her son after he moved out due to his desire for space, but they still talked daily, and he visited often. She also admitted to tattling on her son to his girlfriend and keeping it a secret from him, but justified her actions by saying that she was concerned for Kaylee's well-being. OOP later made an update and revealed that her son was indeed cheating on Kaylee with another woman. She confronted him and told him that cheating was not okay. She also explained that she did not want the other woman to build a relationship with her son based on a lie, as she was planning on getting off birth control and getting pregnant. OOP's son admitted to cheating once a month and claimed that it was because Kaylee was on her period. OP gives an update. Update. I wasn't going to make an update for a few days or weeks, but I took some advice from messages I got. I just wanted to clear a few things up first. I give my son space and freedom, but I wanted him to be able to take time from me entirely if he wished. Throughout his teenage years, whenever he was upset, he would ask me to leave him alone. I would oblige, but honestly, if he didn't speak to me for more than 3 days, I would just ask if he was okay. After his biological father died, I told him he could have a break from talking if he wanted, and I would wait for the okay to contact him. The break only lasted for maybe a week, and he wanted to call me and visit. For the actual update, Kaylee decided to call him. She talked things out with her sister and decided to ask him. Apparently he was cheating, but told her that it was because she was on her period and very sensitive to everything. He said he had done it 3 other times, all while she is on her period. She called me and told me before my son told me, but in his defense, he was busy explaining things to his girlfriend and now Mike, who he accidentally wrapped into this. It's only 12 in the afternoon and he wants to tell me in detail after work, which I told him was okay. He told me he was sorry for lying and I told him it was okay, but it hurt my feelings. I didn't mention this in the post or to him, but his biological dad cheated on me, and that is why we are apart. He cheated on me before I was pregnant with my son and for the first year of our marriage. I did not want my son to think that was okay. I talked to Kaylee, and she is just head over heels for my son, and said if he promises not to do it again, she would stay with him. I haven't told him that because that is not my business. They can talk about that. My son has sent me a few messages since about work, but he seems extremely sorry. I am a bit disappointed in him, but I think it's because of what I went through and how hard being a single mother after the man you thought loved you just left. Kaylee said that she would try to be a more attentive girlfriend, which honestly sucks to hear because this is not her fault. I am not going to dictate their relationship and tell her to find someone else, but it does shock me that she can forgive. As much as I want to be mad at my son, I really can't. I've never gotten mad at him before, and I think this situation just brought me back to everything that happened when he was little. I hope my son can learn from this. Tonight when we talk, I'm going to be a little strict on him, obviously, but again, he is an adult. If he says he's going to cheat on her, I cannot stop him. I really hope he learns. A commenter asked OOP about Kaylee, to which she replied, I absolutely will stay in her life. I just hope that it won't cause any drama moving forward, and I hope my son has an explanation for his behavior. I will make an update sometime within the following days, but so far, all I have found out is my son has sometimes ignored Kaylee for days on end with no explanation, and I haven't heard of it because she is a nervous person who avoids conflict. He also wants to invite a girl over for dinner tonight, which he never does ever, and I find it suspicious, but I'm hoping it is his friends. As for the lying, I have messaged Mike in hopes that he knows anything about my son. Another commenter stated that OOP did not break up her son, and Kaylee, her son's lying, did. The most important missing information, according to this commenter, was whether Mike got his controller back. OOP replied to a different commenter who criticized her for allowing her son space and freedom and accused her of being a terrible mother for choosing to love her son's girlfriend over her son. OOP explained that she initially limited her contact with her son after he moved out due to his desire for space, but they still talked daily, and he visited often. She also admitted to tattling on her son to his girlfriend and keeping it a secret from him, but justified her actions by saying that she was concerned for Kaylee's well-being. OOP later made an update and revealed that her son was indeed cheating on Kaylee with another woman. She confronted him and told him that cheating was not okay. She also explained that she did not want the other woman to build a relationship with her son based on a lie, as she was planning on getting off birth control and getting pregnant. OOP's son admitted to cheating once a month and claimed that it was because Kaylee was on her period. Listen, your son has cheated on his girlfriend at least 4 times in the last year and has decided to pin the blame on her body. That is grossly unfair and abusive, and he needs to know that, said a top commenter. OOP then gave a final update in the comments, stating that she was getting her son into therapy as soon as possible and advising him to put his relationship with Kaylee on hold. She also revealed that her son had wanted to invite a friend over for dinner, hoping for a friends with benefits situation. Wow, this is a really tough situation. I can't imagine how difficult it must be to see your child make choices that you don't agree with, especially when they are hurting someone else. If you enjoyed today's video, be sure to check out another video on your screen. Submit your own stories at you'rethejerk.com. Subscribe now, or you're definitely the jerk.